I'll be back. The Terminator wasn't just another sci-fi action flick. It was a low-budget gamble that reshaped cinema, technology, and pop culture forever. Behind the cold steel of the T-800 and the neon-soaked streets of Los Angeles, chaos ruled. Exploding props, stolen shots, near-death stunts, and clashing egos. This movie was forged in pure fire. Today, we're breaking down 20 shocking behind-the-scenes facts about the Terminator. From secret guerrilla filmmaking tricks to the wild near disasters no one ever talks about. And stick around for the bonus fact. It's the strangest of them all. So lock and load, because once you know these secrets, you'll never see the film the same way again. Let's begin. Cameron filmed without permits. James Cameron didn't just push boundaries, he ignored them. To save money, much of the Terminator was shot guerrilla style without permits. Entire chase sequences were filmed on the streets of LA with stolen shots. Crew members would set up quickly, grab a scene, and disappear before police arrived. For example, the scene of Sarah Connor leaving her apartment was filmed this way. No closed streets, no official permission, just raw, risky filmmaking. This meant actors often performed with real pedestrians in the background, unaware they were extras. Cameron later admitted this gave the film its gritty, real-world edge. But it was also dangerous. Had the cops caught them, production could have been shut down. It wasn't polished Hollywood magic. It was guerrilla chaos, and it worked. Schwarzenegger's leather jacket problem. Arnold Schwarzenegger may look invincible as the T-800, but even he had wardrobe struggles. The now iconic black leather jacket, it was a nightmare. Cameron wanted it tight, almost like a second skin to emphasize the machine beneath. But Schwarzenegger's massive bodybuilder frame made finding the right fit nearly impossible. Costume designer Bob Ringwood had to customize multiple jackets, each altered after daily fittings. During fight scenes, the leather restricted Arnold's movements, forcing him to adjust his body mechanics like a machine, ironically enhancing the robotic effect. Off camera, though, the tight leather caused constant overheating under the hot LA sun and studio lights. What audiences saw as cold menace was really Arnold sweating buckets in silence. Not sleek rebellion, pure discomfort. The exploding truck nearly killed crew, the fiery climax where the tanker truck explodes. That wasn't just spectacle, it was survival. The production could afford only one real tanker explosion. Pyrotechnics expert Roger George set up massive charges, but the blast was far stronger than expected. When the truck ignited, the fireball mushroomed into the sky, shaking buildings blocks away. Crew members, who were standing closer than safety guidelines allowed, barely escaped with scorched eyebrows and ringing ears. Schwarzenegger himself had to sprint away, the heat blistering against his skin. Had anyone miscalculated, lives would have been lost. Cameron later joked, that was not acting, Arnold was really running for his life. The scene burned itself into cinematic history, but behind the lens it was chaos, danger, and luck. O.J. Simpson almost played the Terminator. Here's a twist that could have changed movie history forever. O.J. Simpson was originally considered for the role of the Terminator. Studio executives thought his celebrity status would boost ticket sales. But James Cameron rejected the idea immediately, arguing Simpson looked too nice to play a cold-blooded killer. Ironically, years later, the world would view Simpson in a very different light. Schwarzenegger, who at the time wasn't yet a proven star, ultimately got the role and turned it into career-defining gold. Imagine the Terminator without Arnold's Austrian accent, without the robotic delivery of, "I'll be back." Not chilling, but absurd, this wasn't just a casting decision, it was fate. And the entire tone of the film hinged on it. Linda Hamilton's broken ankle. Sarah Connor's transformation from waitress to warrior started off painfully, literally. Early in production, Linda Hamilton broke her ankle. Instead of halting the shoot, Cameron adjusted the schedule, shooting around her injury. Many scenes were filmed with Hamilton hiding her limp or using creative camera angles to mask it. During chase sequences, Hamilton was forced to grit her teeth through pain, giving her performance a raw desperation that audiences read as terror. The crew even used body doubles for wide-running shots until she healed enough to sprint again. What audiences saw as fear was partly real agony. It wasn't just acting, it was survival. Sarah Connor's vulnerability on screen mirrored Hamilton's real physical struggle, blurring the line between character and reality. Cameron's nightmare sparked the film. The Terminator wasn't born in a studio boardroom. It came from James Cameron's fevered nightmare. While battling a high fever in Rome, Cameron dreamed of a metallic skeleton dragging itself from the fire, carrying kitchen knives. He woke drenched in sweat, sketched the image on hotel stationery, and couldn't shake it. That haunting vision became the foundation of the T-800. The fire imagery and relentless pursuit came directly from his subconscious. Cameron later said, "It felt less like creation and more like something that invaded me." What started as a dream turned into cinematic legend. It wasn't careful planning. It was raw imagination crashing through illness. The result? One of the most unforgettable villains in movie history. The police station shootout was a logistics nightmare. The infamous police station massacre tested the limits of the production. With a tiny budget, Cameron had to make 30 extras look like an entire police force. To pull it off, background actors were cycled in and out of different uniforms, filmed from multiple angles, and reused as different cops. Meanwhile, the shoot dragged into the early morning hours, exhausting everyone. Arnold's shotgun blanks created brutal noise, rattling walls and shaking nearby businesses. The crew had to bribe local shop owners not to call the police, fearing the production would get shut down. What looks like an epic battle on screen was a shoestring juggling act behind the scenes. It wasn't just a shootout, it was survival filmmaking at its most desperate. Schwarzenegger practiced with guns every day. The Terminator's robotic precision with firearms didn't happen by chance. Schwarzenegger trained for weeks with expert weapons handlers. Every day, he drilled reloading and firing until he could assemble, disassemble, and reload a gun without looking down. His goal? Eliminate all traces of human hesitation. Cameron insisted the T-800 had to look like it was born with weapons. Arnold practiced so relentlessly that he eventually performed full magazine changes blindfolded. By the time cameras rolled, he moved with frightening mechanical grace. This wasn't acting, it was conditioning. Audiences saw a machine. What they didn't know was that Schwarzenegger's obsessive training blurred the line between man and machine until he almost became the Terminator. Budget cuts, forced creative genius. The Terminator looks slick today, but it was shot on a painfully tight budget of just $6.4 million. To put that in perspective, most Hollywood blockbusters of the time had 5 times that. Cameron and his crew had to cut corners constantly. For the future war scenes, they built miniature sets in a small warehouse, using smoke machines and low lighting to mask their scale. The futuristic hunter-killers? They were stop-motion miniatures moved frame by frame. It wasn't high-tech, it was ingenuity. And yet, this stripped-down approach gave the movie its gritty realism. What audiences thought were grand, futuristic battles were filmed on tiny model sets. Not blockbuster polish, but clever tricks. It forced creativity, and that made the film legendary. Schwarzenegger only has 58 lines. Here's the kicker. Despite being the star, Arnold Schwarzenegger has fewer than 60 lines of dialogue in the entire film. Cameron knew Arnold's thick accent and imposing frame worked better with silence than speeches. The fewer words, the more menacing. Lines like, "I'll be back," and "Come with me if you want to live," became iconic precisely because of their scarcity. Arnold himself was skeptical at first, fearing he'd look like a mindless prop. But Cameron reassured him. Less was more, and he was right. Each line landed like a hammer, echoing beyond the film into pop culture history. And before we dive into the next 10 facts, go ahead and like and subscribe because the chaos is only just beginning. What's coming will blow your mind. Stan Winston built the UA endoskeleton by hand. The metallic monster that haunted Cameron's fever dream needed a body, and legendary effects wizard Stan Winston delivered. With a small team, Winston sculpted, molded, and hand-built the T-800 endoskeleton out of fiberglass and metal. The process took months, with countless adjustments to make it both menacing and functional for filming. To create the illusion of movement, Winston's crew built animatronics operated by wires and servos, often requiring 6 technicians to control one shot. For close-ups, they used life-size puppets. Cameron shot the machine in quick, shadowy bursts to disguise its limitations. What audiences saw was a towering nightmare of steel. Behind the curtain, it was craftsmanship, sweat, and endless late nights in Winston's workshop. It wasn't futuristic technology, it was old-school artistry that looked like tomorrow. Schwarzenegger terrified strangers off camera. Arnold didn't take off the Terminator look once the cameras stopped. Between setups, he often wandered the streets of Los Angeles, still wearing the leather jacket, dark shades, and prosthetic battle damage makeup. Unsuspecting pedestrians were stunned and terrified when they saw what looked like a bloodied cyborg casually buying coffee or walking down a sidewalk. In one story, a driver nearly crashed after locking eyes with Arnold's makeup-scorched face at a red light. Cameron loved it. It reinforced the illusion that the Terminator wasn't just a character, it was real. It wasn't a movie monster confined to the screen. It was roaming the streets. James Cameron's brutal editing choices. The first cut of the Terminator ran much longer, but Cameron slashed it down mercilessly. Entire subplots were cut, including scenes of Sarah Connor's roommate Ginger's life and a subplot involving Cyberdyne employees. Cameron believed every frame had to push the story forward. Nothing else mattered. Arnold later admitted he was shocked at how many of his scenes were trimmed, but Cameron insisted that less Arnold meant more mystery and menace. The editing process was so ruthless that Cameron nearly collapsed from exhaustion, living in the editing suite for weeks. What emerged wasn't a slow burn, it was a lean, relentless pursuit, just like the machine itself. The nightclub shoot took forever. The tech noir nightclub shootout looks electric on screen, but filming it was a nightmare. The crew rented an actual nightclub, then transformed it with neon and smoke. Shooting at night, they had to finish before dawn or pay astronomical overtime fees. Extras packed the room, sweating under hot lights, while Arnold repeated his slow, robotic walk through the crowd dozens of times. The strobe lights caused headaches for both crew and actors, and Hamilton remembered the shoot as endless. To keep energy up, Cameron blasted loud music between takes. The result was visually hypnotic, but behind the scenes, it was hours of repetition, sweat, and fatigue. It wasn't just a cool set piece. It was endurance filmmaking disguised as neon chaos. Michael Biehn nearly lost the role of Kyle Reese. Michael Biehn didn't secure the role of Kyle Reese easily. At first, he almost lost it because of his southern accent. During auditions, Biehn had just finished a stage play and couldn't shake the accent. Cameron initially dismissed him, believing Reese had to sound like a hardened soldier, not a farmhand. Luckily, Biehn got a second chance and nailed the audition after dropping the accent. Once on set, he committed fully, performing many of his own stunts, including dangerous jumps and fight choreography. The role demanded both intensity and vulnerability. Without Biehn's raw dedication, the love story at the center of the Terminator would have collapsed. What audiences didn't know, Kyle Reese almost never existed. Cameron fought the studio over casting. Orion Pictures wasn't convinced about Cameron's choices. They pushed hard for bigger names. Mel Gibson, Sylvester Stallone, even Bruce Willis were floated for Kyle Reese and the Terminator. Cameron resisted fiercely, insisting Schwarzenegger and Biehn were perfect. In fact, Cameron's first meeting with Arnold was supposed to convince the studio he wasn't right. Instead, Arnold spent the meal detailing how he'd play the Terminator. Cameron was so impressed, he immediately sketched Arnold as the machine on a napkin. What was meant to kill his chances sealed the role. The studio doubted. Cameron gambled. The gamble redefined careers. It wasn't compromise, it was conviction. The final chase was shot guerrilla style. The nail-biting finale, with Sarah Connor trapped in the factory, was a patchwork of guerrilla tactics. Many shots of Arnold riding the motorcycle and smashing vehicles were filmed in industrial zones without permits, under cover of night. Crew members had to hide from security guards, moving lights and cameras in minutes. One story claims Cameron himself hauled gear in a van to avoid suspicion. The claustrophobic factory finale was built on a minimal budget using smoke, clever lighting, and rearranged sets to make it appear bigger than it was. The tension felt real because the production itself was operating under pressure, one step away from disaster. The chase wasn't just on screen, it was behind the camera too. Lance Henriksen's strange audition. Before Schwarzenegger was cast, James Cameron considered Lance Henriksen for the role of the Terminator. Henriksen even showed up to his audition dressed as the cyborg, wearing a ripped leather jacket, gold foil on his teeth, and fake scars painted across his face. He kicked down Cameron's office door, sat silently, and just stared. Executives were terrified. While he didn't land the title role, the unsettling audition impressed Cameron enough to cast Henriksen as Detective Vukovich. Imagine the film without Arnold's towering figure. It might have been a quieter, creepier Terminator, a human-sized nightmare instead of a muscle-bound machine. Casting didn't just shift the tone, it rewrote movie history. The "I'll be back" debate. The most famous line in the movie, "I'll be back," was almost cut. Schwarzenegger initially resisted it, arguing it sounded awkward with his accent. He wanted to say, "I will be back." Cameron refused, insisting the shorter line had more punch. Arnold later admitted he didn't see the appeal until audiences roared with laughter and applause at test screenings. That three-word line became his lifelong signature, repeated across sequels, parodies, and global pop culture. What Arnold thought was clumsy became eternal. Sometimes the smallest fight on set creates the biggest legacy. Test screenings nearly sank the film. When the Terminator was first shown to test audiences, the reaction wasn't entirely positive. Some viewers found it too dark, too violent, even confusing. Executives panicked, fearing the film would flop, but Cameron refused to re-edit it into a safer, softer version. He trusted his instincts that the raw intensity was the point. When the movie finally released in 1984, word of mouth spread like wildfire and it became a sleeper hit, grossing over $78 million worldwide. What almost got buried in the editing room instead exploded into one of the most influential films of the decade. Cameron sued his own agent. Here's the wildest twist of all. James Cameron was stuck in a contract that tied him to producer Dino De Laurentiis. To escape, he wrote The Terminator and gave the script to his agent, who tried to sell it without crediting him. Furious, Cameron fired the agent and later sued, claiming betrayal. To secure full creative control, Cameron sold the rights to The Terminator for just $1 to producer Gail Ann Hurd, who promised he could direct. That risky move cost him millions in royalties, but gave him the freedom to make the movie his way. It wasn't business savvy, it was artistic defiance, and it made history. The Terminator wasn't built on big budgets or studio trust. It was built on fever dreams, guerrilla filmmaking, raw injuries, and relentless conviction. What could have been a forgotten B movie became a cultural cornerstone, not by luck, but by chaos transformed into vision. If you loved discovering these hidden truths, smash that like button, subscribe for more, and remember, when it comes to movie secrets, we'll be back.